video blog. So in high school, I think it was freshman year, and I'm at the lunch table with Scott and these other people, friends of mine, Jeff and so on, supposedly. And they goat this kid, Rob, into attacking me. They incited him. I've never done Rob wrong in my life to that period of time. Never. And I was friends with his brother John, and they were both in my grade, and they were both adopted. So I've always been good to both Rob and John Anderson. They were both adopted brothers. And now you get this guy in the intersection with his Amazon Prime, and it's a bunch of fucking bullshit. So, but getting to it, so I walk away from lunch and, the table, and I'm walking, and Rob catches up to me, and then he attacks me in the hallway. And I don't want to hurt him, so I picked him up and I threw him against this doorway. And on the side of the doorway was fiberglass. And when I slammed him against it, it cracked the fiberglass. Now, he attacked me. And he was goaded by others that incited him to attacking me. So if anyone's teaching people to attack me or tailgate me in any way, shape, or form, doing negative to me, they should come down on them like the hand of God and punish them incredibly severe. But they haven't for the last 10 years. They've been letting them unrighteously do this evil to me. But getting back to it, I defended myself. But I didn't hit him or anything else. I just tied him up. And then came our school security, and they separated us. But I didn't hit him. I just suppressed him. I would never hit him. So there's a big difference. I delineated. And I understood that Rob was incentivized, incited. This is why I understand the Shania brother, whose brother talked him in to doing the bombing in Boston. He radicalized him. He trusted his older brother. And all the evidence said that he was a good kid, the younger brother. The older brother had a problem in assimilation. And because things weren't working out in America for him, he became more and more resentful because things weren't working out. The younger brother was well-liked and was achieving and had many friends. The older brother didn't. So he found friends online. Oh, yes. So it was the internet. And he found these radical groups online, and they talked the older brother into coming. So he flew into Europe, then crossed over, I think, into Syria, maybe it was. And he was there for a while training. And then he crossed back over and then came to the United States. And the funny thing is, it was documented that he might have crossed over into Syria. And there was, I think he might have been on the watch list. But these are government blunders. But the point about him not fitting in, him not assimilating, truly, and this is what causes radicalism. So the immigration system has to understand, if people don't fit in the system and can't achieve in the system, and you give them opportunities to achieve, you have to remove them from the system and put them somewhere else where they belong. They don't belong here. And if not, that radicalizes. And our government keeps on failing. But it's the same thing with the militias in the Oklahoma City bombing. Not going in and investing in communities and allowing those communities to be undercapitalized and under-opportunitized, it creates the same thing. I watched the whole trial with the Oklahoma City bombing, all the interviews with Timothy McVeigh, and then read. And I do a lot of research on this. And so this injustice, you get injustice. So it doesn't matter. You talk about the kids in prison, the people in prison, and most of them have been sexually molested. That's why pedophiles don't last. And so overwhelming male prisoners in prison have been sexually molested. But again, the government fails with the pedophile priest and many others. And these people feel betrayed by the system. And so they punch back by becoming criminals. And it's their way of lashing out at the system that they feel failed them. And so you study this, prison populations and that, and this is where these groups feed off of, as Malcolm X went out to and overseas, and he did this and talked about the injustices in the United States, and in turn, it gave these organizations that felt the United States was being unfair to them already, as Saddam said that the United States was destroying the Middle East by what? Stripping off its resources, its oil. But this is why things need to go on exchanges. When you allow OPEC and the bears and you don't allow free market, that's why you have the blood diamonds. And you have these things that distort, then people use them against you. And bin Laden used OPEC. You're just too stupid to understand. And he believed, truly, because the U.S. government was propping up this, that he could get people to radicalize against the United States, even after Rockefeller and them taught them everything and gave them the technology for oil and gas exploration, but the majority of that was going to the United States. And because you didn't set up a system and enforce that no one can give to the United States that has a system of collusion, it cannot be allowed. And they see these things, and this is why the Bible says excellence before God, meaning you earn what you receive, and you must be on the fruits of your labor. And anyone giving anything to them, and this is why people target kids, truly, because they give their kids certain benefits that are extreme, And this makes them targets of people that feel the system has done them wrong. So when you give your kids exceptional clothing, give them Porsches and Mercedes and BMWs and so on, and then they look at their life and how the system, they believe, allowed them to be molested and allowed the system to strip them of what was rightfully theirs, they become the Hell's Angels and many others. Do you know I did a lot of independent interviews with biker gangs? Unlike my friend Larry that hung out with them, I became friends, and I didn't support any illegal action, nor did I help them, but they opened up to me, and I could understand their history, and this is what I did when I was doing drugs with Corey and that. Literally, people were opening up, and I got them to agree not to repeat the sins of their parents, not to do the wrongs of their parents. I first opened up, and most of them were abused or neglected in some way and felt their parents did great harm to them. And I went through it, gave them avenues, and then told them they can't be like their parents. They must rebuke. Do not grow to become your parents. These things that you believe they've done you wrong, you must remove from your life. There are other things they did right. You keep those. You must differentiate between good and evil, right and wrong. And you remove the filth. And you keep on purifying, and you teach the kids you the same way. When you grow up and understand, you will understand the things of right and wrong, good and evil. And you must become better than I. And the things where I failed, you must succeed. You must neglect. You must not neglect anything that I accomplished righteously. You must continue those. But all those that I have wronged, you must rebuke. And so you must become better than myself. And through this, the parent sees through the eyes of the child and repents for their sin, for their shortcomings, for their failures. So it prepares them for heaven. So it is a system of self-reflection. You eventually, as your children become adult, and then they get married and have children, and then they understand, and you have these things, and then you get these deep philosophical discussions about how they thought and how they reacted. And not because they felt it was wrong is it necessarily wrong. It is adult discussion, and then eventually you come to the core truth between the two of you. Truly, it doesn't matter how many children you do this one-on-one, and you come to the core truth of where you succeeded and where you have failed. And you iron this out with him. So they move forward in wisdom, not knowledge. They already have knowledge. They need discernment or wisdom. And so this process is supposed to be repeated, and each generation is supposed to move forward in more excellence. As we grow in scale, everything becomes more complex. And going out into space, deep sea mining, the earth, and global climate, and so on, as we get more capabilities, things become more complex. A computer is more complex than pen and paper. And so this complexity brings difficulties. That's why we get online stalking and everything else. And so you have to understand these things. And so it's only going to get more complex as we find new elements, new minerals. Yes, we discover new minerals, new elements, truly. And then we create them as well. And everything grows in complexity, meaning you can easily screw up. You get lost in complexity. That's Optim's razor. So the simple talking about, because you have to understand the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid comes from Optim's razor. You have to do what Einstein said. Take the complex and make it understandable. And true genius is taking high sophistication and making it understandable. And the greatest of teachers, and you learn this from Socrates to Plato, Plato to Aristotle, taking immense sophistication and bringing it to a point where they have total understanding, perfect comprehension. That's what makes a great teacher. And when students aren't comprehending, truly, and this is why we give grades, it's a reflection on the teacher as well as the student. And when they get C's or D's or E's or F's, which are the same, then you have to understand this. And so these things we bring into this country, and they bring third world mentalities into the first world. And they drive in Mexico like the wild, wild west. So do they in India. And then we don't nip them in the bud. And then people that grew up in rural communities, farmland, there's no speed on private land. And so they drive trucks and they go crazy. And they don't adhere. And then you bring them into a suburban or city area, and they're cowboys. Not urban cowboy, where they're crossing at the crosswalk, him and Dustin, and then the taxi cab driver, where is he from? Look at urban cowboy when the taxi cab driver makes the turn. Look at the color of his skin. He's not from here. That's my point. Now, the accent and others, you can tell a European from an American. So the point is, he drives like he does in his country, where it's survival instinct. Like my boss, Bill, who had a job in Asia, and his driver would go through intersections without looking left or right. And he says, I just take this on chance. And he says, well, you can't drive for me anymore. And he left Asia. Now, he did adopt a female, him and his wife, and raised her. But he wasn't going to live in Asia where they drive like this. He was in, I think, Thailand or something, not in Japan. And so people leave countries because people don't follow the law. And so they don't want to be in high-risk societies. So this is why you get college campuses and that. And the professors like to be around low risk. And so people don't want high risk. So Jennifer Kim, she did everything perfect, including driving. Never getting speeding tickets or anything. Because they value. These people come from a dog-eat-dog world. where if you don't get your daily bread, you starve. So they fight fiercely for that spot. And that's why they drive the way they do. But once these people start getting something of substance, you get Singapore, Taiwan, and yes, Japan. And as Japan has been doing a better job with wealth, the Yakuza has started disappearing because they have been systematically working on inequities. They dropped their prison population from 81,000 down to under 40,000. And they're looking to drop it again for a country of 125 million, 40,000 prisoners across the whole country. And they're looking to cut that in half. And they keep on working the problem. So the North Shore and why people moved up here, and I grew up here, people didn't drive crazy anywhere. People didn't tolerate it. They had too much to live for. So I grew up here, and this shit doesn't exist. But these people come in, and life is cheap to them. It's a dime a dozen from India. And Latin America. And they come in with the thing. All these people aren't fighting for their daily bread. They have no excuse to do what they're doing. And God watches. These people are going to burn. They have no excuse to break the law. They are not fighting for life. If you get fired from your job, as I've been wrongfully fired over 10 times, I still had my daily bread. We have unemployment. So God watches. Those that are given the most have the most responsibility. And you bring people into a system and they don't thoroughly understand this. This is why Sweden and Switzerland and in the Wall Street Journal, they were taking these refugees in, forced by the EU to take them. They didn't want them. And they said, call us Nazis. And why did they say this? Because this people are coming into the system and they're not assimilating and they don't understand the system. And if they don't assimilate, then the system can't work. They become a kink in the system. And they said that our systems are failing and we're getting violence in communities where we never had it before. Because they understood, the people growing up there understood the system. And this is why you don't have turnover. And this is where the government is very wrong. You got to understand local, county, and state laws, which differ. And you must understand the system. But when you have people moving around and doing these things, they don't understand the system. And so you can't operate in a system which you have no ability to understand. And so you get failure. And so you get things like Rob attacking me and then me defending myself, and I get punished and suspended for a week. And I took in-school suspension, and then they forced me to pay for the window, which I shouldn't have had to pay for, another injustice, and I had to pay the fence, the school fence, to repay. So I didn't pay out of my pocket, I paid through labor. Me and Rob painted the fence all the way down from the beginning on Waukegan Road all the way to the back that separated Clavinia, I think it's Clavinia or whatever, the subdevelopment, from Deerfield High School. We painted the whole thing in 1 week. But again, I didn't deserve to be suspended. That was my welcome to high school. And then they kept on doing injustices to me and not punishing those that did wrongs against me. They let them get away with it. I suffered from this in elementary, but the one thing I could do in elementary is defend myself, which they forbid in high school. Physical violence. But in elementary school, I kicked the fucking shit out of you. I at least had the ability to defend myself. Now you've made me helpless again. And you allow these people to systematically harm me, systematically threaten me. And you bring people into a system, and Costa, my other friend, he learned this as well. And many other friends, Simon and others, preach this as well. You have people operating in a first world that has different mechanisms of survival, different rules of the game. And you bring second and third world into it without education, and this is why we don't give immigrants any leash. They must be forced through discipline to work in the system and with the system. The cartels don't. All the Italian mafia, the Russian mafia, the Romanian, the Polish, you name it, they don't. Eastern Europe was broken. It was a system of corruption. The Soviet Union was a system of corruption and patronage. So was Eastern Europe, even in the church. And in Romania, you had massive tragedies where the Catholic priest was having sex with the nun. And through this, they were aborting the fetus, and they found the skeletons in the basement of the orphanage after the wall fell. Look it up. But it was a system of wrong. They weren't true Catholics. They didn't hold the vows. And so you bring people into a system. Why do you think Harvard and Yale? I'm going to go on Tumblr and let's look at violent incidents on campus at Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Brown. And let's take the whole Ivy League. I'll go next. And then compare this to Southern Mississippi or Florida Eastern or whatever. And then you'll see that these individuals understand the system better. And they do. And through understanding the system better, and they believe they have great things awaiting for them, the cup will flow over. So to them, doing any form of criminal activity, as Jen grew up and understood this with her future,